So, Wendy James, thanks again for talking to Keep Cardiff Live once again. Thank you for that.
My
And
pleasure. Happy to be back.
and actually, I wanted to mention the first thing to say to you was the first interview that series of interviews that we did turned out to be massively popular, probably
Uh,
amongst the most popular on the site.
Yeah, I went back and rewatched them. We really covered a lot of ground. And I especially like to see Bailey, the dog, poking his head in.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember, he died. He died.
Oh, sorry about that.
I don't know if you remember, he was never my dog. He was a neighbor's dog, but we'd taken a shine to each other. But he actually lived on a farm and he had a little farming accident. So my poor
Uh,
boy isn't here to stick his head into the camera any longer.
hmm, that's sad. I mean, Tony, the editor of the site, lost his dog a couple of years ago, and he's still struggling to get over it. So get so attached to animals, don't we?
Yes, yes. But anyway, so Bailey, rest in peace.
Well, we'll do this as a tribute to Bailey then.
Thank you. That's lovely. Anyway, go
Um,
ahead.
Going on to music, 10th album, The Shape of History, obviously just on the way out, being released and getting promoted and all the rest of it. For those people who don't know, because I've looked into it a bit, of course, but the inspiration for the title and to some extent the songs on it.
Oh, me, you want me to
Yeah,
answer?
yeah, sorry,
You're
yeah.
going to tell me what it was.
No, no,
Um,
when you tell me.
it is, well, it is my 10th album, and that is a round, proud number, isn't it, to have reached that.
Amazing.
And uh, and I guess, I had the phrase in my head, as I always do. I did with Queen High Straight too, the shape of history. And then I just started thinking in a more kind of semi-philosophical way. Well, the whole of one's life is the shape of one's history, right?
Mm.
And applied musically, you can go back through all these albums now and see that some things have remained remarkably consistent in the way I write songs and the style in which I write them and the noises I choose. And also throughout that life of musical songwriting, I've expanded upon some of those themes or even gone down a little bit of reggae here, a little bit of heavy rock there. Whatever tickles my fancy in songwriting, but with a consistent theme of always Velvet Underground, Stooges, New York, New Wave.
Yeah.
My touchstone of where I'm comfortable, punky pop, no wave, new wave, so on. So there is that whole and lyrically there's once again some biting, seemingly, because I deliver them always very nicely. So it sounds like I'm being nice, but there's actually some quite biting lyrics in there. But also there is a more shape of history type of philosophical, although that's too grand, really, more like a comfort in knowing that one has gone through a certain amount of life and some things remain exactly the same and some things have evolved. And but I think basically we do expand in our lives, but we do remain the same as well.
So,
So
sorry, Wendy. So it's interesting what you're saying there because I've listened to some of the stuff. For example, Freedomsville, which is the first single, it's very hooky.
mm.
It's how does that in your mind as the writer? How does if it does veer back towards those kind of punky kind of roots, or is it in the
out,
lyric?
out of all of them, I'd say Freedomsville is my touchstone right back to the beginning of Transvision Vamp.
Okay.
We were one of the first bands out of West London to really harness the new technology as it was then of sequencing. And there's a particularly good film clip that's lurking around on YouTube of when Transvision Vamp played a live show in Hamburg in Germany.
Hmm.
And I remember that tour. I guess it was the Velveteen tour. No, maybe it was the Pop Art tour. Anyway, we opened with Trash City, and that was a big intro number with all those sequences and different samples blaring.
Hmm.
And I listened to it. I know what got me started on it. It was during lockdown, and oh, I can't remember the guy's name. What's the Charlatans? guy, Tim Burgess,
But Tim Burgess, yeah, well done.
he had started doing this thing where he would revisit his class, his favorite record collection on Twitter, and people would chime in with their comments and so on. So I remember he did that with Velveteen, and it got me to looking and listening to some of our old stuff that is available on YouTube. And it just blew my mind, the sound of the sequences on Trash City. And at the same time, I'm because there, different regions of the world have different filters through which basically the same thing's happening. So there was the kind of West London sequencer sound, and we were heavily influenced by Blade Runner and The Future and Ridley Scott. And at the same time, Giorgio Moroder was doing his Blondie version out there with American Gigolo in America, in the West Coast. And at the same time, there was a kind of European darker version of electro slash sequencing sounds, but all basically coming from the same ideas or inputs, but getting filtered through these different countries have different sounds to a degree. And and at the same time, I always, it sounds a bit hoity-toity, but I was looking at a runway, a catwalk show, and I do recommend this because sometimes catwalk fashion shows have incredible music put to them. And I was watching a catwalk show by the famous French designer called Yves Saint Laurent, and they have an incredible music director, and I guess he's in his 30s or something. And so he'd done like a modern version of all of our old sequence
Oh,
sounds.
wow.
And it was just so cinematic,
Mm,
so powerful,
mm,
like massive, or, because we used to use samples of orchestral stabs against a big thumping sequencer sound. And I thought, well, I actually own some of this inheritance
yeah.
because I'm one of the ones that started this sound.
Mm.
And so I set out to, I write my guitar, I write my songs on guitar. So
I
there
was
was
going to
nothing.
ask you that. Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
So just on guitar, singing along to
Mm,
it.
mm,
But then when I get together with my band, and I remember I went around to James Sclavunos' little pre-production suite. He's the drummer. And and he showed me the banks and banks of sequencer choice of sounds you can have. And it was too much and also too cliche as well, because you've kind of heard, you realize that actually every single person making ads for cereal or whatever, they're all going to the same bank of free samples. By bank, I mean a bank of sound, not a bank of
yeah,
money.
sure.
And so actually, in the end, nothing on Freedomsville is actually sequenced. It's all played analog with the musicians doing however long the song is, 5.5 minutes or
Yeah,
something
quite long.
of
Yeah.
and then
Wow.
layering up masses and masses of sounds, so you get one ferocious block of what sounds like an 80s sequencer track, but it's all analog and it sounds modern too.
Yeah, it's actually very hooky as well. I think quite crossover. I think. The other song I picked up on actually is "Everything Is Magic," and I wanted to ask you a little bit about what's going on there lyrically, because it seems quite an interesting one lyrically.
um well, there are some direct lyrics in there, but I guess the overarching chorus is just, oh, you're going to make me sound like a hippie, but the wonder of life, right? Just
Yeah, yeah.
you know, uh, we live in, well, I guess every generation lives through trials and traumas and
Hmm.
horrors, and social media to a degree has an investment in keeping people afraid rather than positive. And so what you start to understand, there's such bravery and such dignity and such courage in so many different areas of the world, whether it's a little girl who's had a limb blown off by a landmine, or anyone going through what they're going through in Ukraine or Gaza slash Israel, or just poverty, living at the poverty line, where your mum's working 3 jobs. I don't need to list all the unfair ways in which human beings have to encounter.
Yeah.
But not everyone goes bad. There are so many just unknown but remarkable human beings
Okay.
that rise up and face these challenges with strength and dignity and love. And it's such an old, that love conquers all. But I do think it's still, hate can really fucking grab hold of you. But I still think love is more important. I still think love's more powerful.
Yeah.
So,
That's a great. I use the word concept, but in a way, it's kind of a concept. That's a really a great statement, I think. And I thought with the lyrics in that song, it was actually just out of interest. I mean, I write songs. I've never been that successful, but I write songs, yeah. And it seemed like you had particular lines which you particularly wanted to get in there quite consciously within the verses. Some of them are almost like a little bit tangential. It seems like they did feel like there was a bit of a depth going on with that song. Stuff you wanted to say,
well, there's one line that says, remember, people get killed in the middle of the road.
Yeah,
Which could be literal, because if you're walking down the middle of a freeway, probably going to get run over. But also, there's nothing worse than being middle of the road, right? Who wants to be vanilla? Who wants to be mediocre? Who wants to, don't go in the middle of the road, you get squashed.
yeah,
Pick a fucking side and fight for it. So there's little things like that. Sometimes I do think I have a nice flourish with words. And so there are some things in there that are really particularly the kind of thing I would say in a conversation, a Wendy kind of line. But then the overarching thing is death is no good option. So it is
yeah.
a wonderful thing to be alive.
Yeah. Um, I had a lot of things I was going to talk to you about, but I'll take you down slightly different routes, I think, with some of this. One of which was favorite songwriters, which we've alluded to already, really. I mean, Dylan and Iggy and
Lou
Lou
Reed,
Reed and that
Lou
stuff.
Reed.
Yeah, yeah. Which, I mean, it's difficult to have any issue with that. They're three of the greatest songwriters, in my opinion. And also a love of harmonies as well, in some of the stuff that you do is interesting. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about your friendship with Chris France and to some extent Tina Weymouth.
All right.
Yeah, because a couple of guys associated, including myself, with the site were pretty big kind of Talking Heads fans, and we look up to those people enormously. But they're your mates, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I've even lived with them.
Wow.
Um, so Tina is like my sister, mother, musician friend. She's a little bit older than me, and if you know her, she's a punk, right? She is a punk and an artist. She's a modern artist. She thinks like a bohemian artist. Her brain is that wonderful, as is Chris's. But also Tina's also a very caring person.
Mhm.
So she'll always tell you to make sure you've got enough clothes on if it's cold outside and stuff. So when I moved to New York, it just so happened that I went to an evening that Chris was curating with a journalist who had worked on the Village Voice, and it was a fascinating evening. I became friends with Chris, and he introduced me to Tina, and we'd all known. I obviously knew about them, but they'd also known about me because we had a certain amount of impact in America as well. And there's nothing Tina loves more than a good punky girl brigade,
Yeah, yeah.
um, of girls that are doing it for themselves.
Mm,
And so Tina and I just became, we can talk. So Tina and I just became very good friends
mm.
very quickly and for life. So, I mean, I'm not in New York all the time now. I'm in France as well, but there'll always be a WhatsApp message flying around.
Well, how amazing it is to have friends like that. I think in terms of Tina, I was thinking about this earlier. I mean, Carol Kay, it's kind of
Yeah.
the kind of
Tina's
quintessential.
a ferocious bass player, isn't she?
She's
I,
awesome, isn't she?
I cannot
Yeah,
believe because they re-released Stop Making Sense.
yeah,
And the mind explodes at the fact that she's carrying her she's tough, right? I've gone hiking with her. She can
yeah.
chug up those hills as good as anyone. But she's doing all of her dance choreographed dancing during Stop Making Sense, holding that bass and singing.
Big old heavy
That
bass, yeah.
that's world-class athleticism.
That's one of my favorite music films ever. I think Stop Making
Yeah.
Sense. Just fantastic film. Remember
Of
seeing that when it first came out. All those, when was that? 70s, 80s? Was it 70s? A long time
80s,
ago.
I think.
Yeah, long time ago. Um, just we haven't got that long today. 'Cause I love talking to you, but I appreciate you got loads of other interviews coming up. Just briefly,
It's a rammed day, yeah.
working.
Sorry.
That's all right. Working with Elvis Costello. I mean, what was that kind of like? Because again, we're big Elvis Costello fans on the site, but I think he has an interesting personality, maybe.
Does he? I mean, I don't really know him. That collaboration happened because I'd written to him, as I'm sure you know, I'd written a letter to him. I'd
I
bumped.
don't know this. No, actually, no, sorry.
Oh,
No.
okay. I'll
Yeah.
speed history it then. Trans Vamp were on another tour of America because with our third album, Little Magnets, we were breaking quite big in America, and so we did two US tours in 1 year, but we were absolutely knackered. So blah blah blah. Nick and I had thought, well, we'll probably have to split the band up because we can't take this anymore.
Hmm.
That was as basic as the decision got. And I was staying in the Sunset Marquis Hotel in Hollywood, which is a famous rock and roll hotel. And I walked into the bar and I bumped into Pete Thomas, the drummer from the
Oh yeah.
Attractions. And I said conspiratorially, Pete, I think we're going to split up when we get to San Diego in a few gigs' time. Do you think Elvis would do anything? Would he write me a song? He said, well, why don't you write to him and see what he says? So that very night, I went up to my bedroom and on Sunset Marquee, I wonder if he still has it. On Sunset Marquee letterhead, I wrote to Elvis and said, I'm going to leave my band. I'm not quite ready to have my own sea legs of writing my own songs yet. Would you do something to help me? I kind of got positive mutterings from his publisher saying, well, this is under consideration. And then when I got back, I didn't hear anything. Then when I got back to London at the end of the tour, and this show, anyway, there was a cassette waiting on the doormat on the inside of the letterbox. And it was a cassette that Elvis and his then girlfriend, Kate Riordan from the Pogues, had recorded, sent me the cassette. It's yours if you want it. It was the whole album. So
Wow.
I literally booked another flight back to Hollywood, walked into then the CEO of whole of MCA Universal, Al Teller was his name, one of those great legendary rock and roll icons of business, and said to Al, I don't want to be on your label anymore. I'm going it alone with Elvis Costello. And he said, well, we have you under contract, but what we will do is we've just recently bought Geffen Records. So they're their own enterprise, but they remain under the umbrella of the Universal Corporation.
Hmm.
So we'll put you onto Geffen so you get your new identity, and we'll do the Elvis Costello album with you. So that's how that happened. But Elvis, he was like, take it or leave it. There wasn't much wiggle room there.
Yeah.
And but his envoy, if you like, from the royal court of McManus was Pete Thomas. So Pete played on the album, and
Okay.
Pete filtered through to me and the rest of the band what Elvis expected of us.
Haha. I'm glad I asked you that. I honestly didn't know that story. Pete Thomas, was an amazing musician as well.
Mm.
We've only got a few minutes, so I'll just talk to you about the in-store tour, which is coming up quite imminently, yeah. Which is you got all the rough trade venues lined up around the UK, plus a whole load of other stores. How did
16 back-to-back shows.
Yeah. So briefly, how did that idea come up, Wendy? And what will those shows consist of? Is it you and acoustic guitars? Are you with other musicians? What is it about?
Been saying it's going to be like my version of the White Stripes because I'm bringing one other musician with me, Alex Ward, and he'll be on guitar and keyboards, and it will be a big electric sound, but it won't be the full six-piece band. It'll be like, so instead of Jack and Meg on drums and voice, it'll be Wendy and Alex on guitar and keyboard and voice, but we'll still be electrified. And I'm going to play a lot of the new songs. I've got about a 50-minute set. I'm going to play a lot of the new songs, and then I picked favorites from all of the previous albums as well. So I'll play those too, and open up the floor to questions and see what happens, but ride the wave and see if we can get a bit of banter going. And
Yeah.
at the end of the evening or afternoon, because some of them are afternoon shows, meet at the merch desk, meet, greet, sign whatever you buy,
Mm.
have a hug, have a photo, you know, a 3 hour odyssey into album 10 and the history and the whole shape of my history.
And in a very, well, ultimately kind of intimate environment, totally different from being on the stage with a full band, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'd done Rough Trade East previously, and I really like that experience. And you may or may not know about me, but I have a very good connection with my fans. And I'm not always out on the road, but when I am, we do like to see each other again. And so it's just a good way for me to explain a little about a song, describe it, break it down for you,
Hmm.
little talk, sing, you know, you'll be able to hear my voice very well because it's just Alex and not the whole band drowning me out. So it just I mean, there's no reason why this shouldn't be one of those great evenings.
And you're
So
looking forward to it, I guess, yeah?
I can't bear the idea. Of course I am. I wouldn't be doing it otherwise.
No.
I'm very excited to come. But I do want your viewers to know that you have to get your entrance from the venue of your choice. And some of my fans are coming to multiple venues, so I encourage that behavior. And but for the deluxe version of The Shape of History, you have to go to my site, thewendyjames.com/store, and get that there. And then you get pull-out posters and lyrics and liner notes and all the good stuff.
And your final day to your tour, which is obviously you've saved the best till last, coming to Cardiff on November the 7th.
Very
Spillers,
excited about that. The
it's
old
a it's a really cool store.
I had a look at their merch last night. They've got some nice mugs and t-shirts and things, as well as all the records. And I was just drawn to it because it just said it's the oldest record store in Britain.
So it claims in the world, I think it claims.
In the world?
I've seen that
Wow.
somewhere, yeah.
Good for them. Well, I'm very honored that they would host me for the final night of my tour. And you know, I originally were ending in Preston, but I got harangued, rightly so, on Facebook and Insta saying, "What about Cardiff? What about Cardiff?" So I was like, "I need a Cardiff," and
Yeah.
that's what made me find Spillers.
Well, like I say at the beginning of the interview, your interview for Keep Cardiff Live was huge. It was just so popular. Do you have any kind of you have connections wherever you go, I guess, but have you got any kind of connection with or thoughts about Cardiff and Wales at all? Just is it just another part of the tour? I don't know.
Um, uh,
Any memories or recollections or great gigs or anything you remember
I
with
do
Cardiff?
know that Transmission Vamp had some real stonking shows in Cardiff over the years.
Hmm.
Um, didn't you host a good Sex Pistols gig as well? Wasn't there a really
Oh, that was
famous?
in Caerphilly.
Was it?
Yeah, that was a legendary night. Yeah.
Yeah, what happened there?
Well, the so-called city fathers might have been city mothers as well, but they
Right,
kicked
they
off and
tried to
ban.
run them out of town.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like an evangelical thing going on. Yeah. It was fairly hilarious actually. I didn't do the Sex Pistols any harm. I wouldn't have thought actually.
No, I think they encourage situations like that.
Yeah.
But so yes, I can't say I've got some best friends lurking around in Wales,
Nice.
but nevertheless, whenever I do come there, I'm always welcomed and it feels at home. So I hope this Spillers is no different.
Yeah, I think well, and the great thing with Spillers, of course, it is an independent store.
Mm.
Has that kind of independent nature to it, which I think is something going back to what you were talking about earlier, actually, a little bit, is
Yeah.
quite special.
Yeah, I'm not do apart. I don't know that you'd call Rough Trade a chain, but I'm not doing the HMVs or anything like that. And I do like independent record stores. And no matter what age you get to in life, there's nothing like walking into the record store and start going through the racks.
Yeah, yeah.
And that just makes you a teenager forever.
Just to ask you one final thing, Wendy, before you go. Will there be a tour coming up for the album? Are the gigs to come?
I would think so, but I have none planned yet. When I get to November the 7th, I'm gonna do nothing and then start making plans for 2025.
Good answer. Wendy, great to speak to you again. Good luck with everything. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mwah.
Cheers,
Keep coming
Wendy.
alive.
Bye bye. Thank you.